Before we dig into it, though, you are in Houston. I have a lot of family throughout the state of Texas. Such an important area when it comes to the U.S. energy and oil markets. What are the conversations that folks are having in the oil industry in Texas and Houston about the impact this war is having?
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. As you can tell, we're having some lovely weather in Houston right now. I mean, one of the big conversations we're having here is how does it disrupt the oil or the price of oil that's flowing to the huge refining and petrochemical corridor that's just 20 minutes down the road from me here in Houston, Texas. And as we reported earlier today, we're seeing some of that impact on diesel prices. I mean, in America, we love to talk about gasoline. It's what millions of people every morning see when they're driving to work. But the pain point at the moment really feels like it's diesel, which crossed the $5 threshold this weekend, which is a level we haven't seen since 2022 and the early days of the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
What is the relationship to diesel's price and the inputs that make diesel? Because these are not the highest oil prices that we've seen by any means. But like you said, diesel's only been $5 a gallon at one point ever before. That was back in 2022. But oil prices have been higher than they were in 2022, back in 2008. So what is it about this environment that gets diesel up to $5 a gallon?
Yeah, so across fuels, the biggest input is always oil. That's what drives the largest part of the gallon cost of either gasoline or diesel. But we came into this year, especially in the US, with kind of low stocks compared to the 10-year average for diesel. So naturally, when inventories are low, that can create a more volatile environment for the fuel. Another big factor is, all oil isn't equal. We have lighter grades, we have heavier grades. In West Texas, we're pumping 13 million barrels a day of light crude that's really good for making gasoline. But what's being curtailed and constrained in the Strait of Hormuz are these heavier grades, which are generally better alongside Venezuelan and Canadian oils for making that diesel. So this conflict has affected the barrels that are better at making that fuel, and that's one of the reasons we've seen some higher price spikes for diesel than for gasoline.
Nathan, as you and the team report out, given its ubiquitousness, diesel's rising costs create higher prices for just about anything further down the supply chain, be it lumber hauled on railway, flat cars, or green pepper shipped to your local grocery store. Like, we have to think about
it's everything.
How it filters through. Having said that, you do kick off the story, you guys do, and you quote somebody, a small business owner, that said, "This is going to cripple our economy." I don't think people think about how much the economy rides on diesel fuel. Tell us about this individual, because by telling those small stories, or those small business owners, backbone of our economy, we kind of learn a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if we think about it in terms of numbers, in the US, we're consuming 4 million barrels a day of diesel. 75% of that goes into transportation. And that's not just your 18-wheelers trucking, big logs across the Pacific Northwest. That's this person we spoke to who sells firewood in the northeast of England. Northeast of America. And so the impact we're seeing of this fuel hitting $5 a gallon, it's not just these big industrial purposes, be it trucking or running tractors. It's going down to mom and pop stores. Another person we spoke to later in the story is a landscape contractor here in Houston, and he's got to buy that fuel for his trucks that carries his equipment, and also buy fuel for his lawnmowers and what he's actually doing his work with.
Yeah, and this is exactly what the Fed was trying to figure out this week, and what we've been trying to figure out. If this landscaper has to spend more on fuel, if this producer of firewood has to spend $11,000 a month instead of $6,000 a month on this fuel, what does it mean for customers? But also, what does it mean for how they're spending other money? How do you look at that in the way that the diesel prices ripple through the economy, not just in the context of they go through everything, but how people pull back on other things when this stuff gets more expensive?
Yeah, I think one of the landscaper's comments was really interesting, which is that for now, he's not adding costs to his services. He's not adding a fuel charge like some might, because he sees this as an opportunity to gain some market share. But down the line, there is a point he'll eventually have to. And I think that's really emblematic of the point we're in the diesel price spike, which is that people are assessing their options and may ultimately be forced into raising their prices at some point down the line, but we're not necessarily there yet.
Yeah, right. Goes back to kind of what is really the main focal point when we think about this U.S. war in Iran, like how long this goes on. Interesting, because on a day when we've got CBS reporting that the administration might be thinking perhaps about putting or getting ready to put troops on the ground, like you don't. Does that mean that that's a further escalation? Does that mean this goes on longer, or is that a means to bringing this to an end? And I guess that's what we have to all kind of figure out. But that's how you have to figure out, right? All these business owners, they must be just watching closely to figure out how long this goes on.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is if we compare gasoline and diesel again, a consumer can cut down on their trips, right? If you're dropping your kid at school in the morning, you can tag on your shop. Maybe that's going to cut some of your weekly mileage. The average diesel consumer can't do that. They have set trucking routes, they have set customers they need to meet. So that's kind of why we're so interested in this fuel as a barometer, because it's a harder one to economize on in America.